Have you noticed your garden looks incredible in spring and early summer, but somewhere around late summer, the color just starts to disappear? The tulips are long gone, the peonies have finished their show, and even your favorite perennials start looking tired and a little worn out. If that sounds familiar, you are not doing anything wrong. The real problem is that most gardens are designed around one single season, usually spring. Today we are looking at 9 flowering shrubs that can help your garden transition beautifully from summer into fall, keeping your landscape looking alive and colorful right when many other plants are starting to fade. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly which shrubs to consider, how to use them well, and how to design a garden that looks intentional instead of accidental. Before we get into the list, let's talk about why flowering shrubs deserve a much bigger role in your garden than most people give them. Shrubs do something that annual flowers and even most perennials cannot do on their own. They create structure. A shrub keeps its shape and presence in the landscape all year long, so even before it blooms, it is already doing work for you, filling space, creating a backdrop, and giving your garden a sense of permanence. Shrubs also fill empty spaces that would otherwise turn into bare soil or weeds once your spring flowers fade. And because many flowering shrubs bloom later in the season than tulips, daffodils, or peonies, they naturally provide seasonal interest exactly when your garden needs it most. There is also a practical side to this. Flowering shrubs typically require less maintenance than replacing annual flowers every single year. You plant them once, you care for them properly, and they reward you season after season. Over time, this gives a garden a more established, mature appearance, the kind of look that makes neighbors stop and ask what your secret is. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is all about helping you create a beautiful, thriving garden through smart plant choices, practical gardening tips, and simple ideas that make gardening easier. If you love discovering plants and techniques that transform outdoor spaces, consider subscribing, and don't forget to turn on the notification button because we have plenty more gardening inspiration coming your way. Before we start the list, I want to ask you something. What plant keeps your garden looking beautiful the longest, the one that just never seems to quit? Share it in the comments. I read every one, and I love seeing what works in different climates and gardens. Now let's get into the shrubs. We are counting down from 9 to 1, and I promise the later shrubs on this list solve some of the most common late-season gardening frustrations. Shrub 9, Caryopteris, also known as Bluebeard. Starting off at number 9 is a shrub that many beginner gardeners have never even heard of, and that is exactly why it deserves more attention. Caryopteris, often called Bluebeard, produces clusters of soft blue flowers right when most of the garden is turning green and tired-looking. The reason this shrub earns a place in a fall garden is simple. True blue flowers are rare in late summer, and Bluebeard delivers that color at a time when your landscape desperately needs it. The blooms appear in loose clusters along the stems, giving the whole shrub a soft, almost hazy blue glow that pairs beautifully with the golden and orange tones that start showing up as fall approaches. Bluebeard typically blooms from late summer into early fall, and the flower color ranges from soft powder blue to a deeper violet blue, depending on the variety. It prefers full sun, meaning at least 6 hours of direct light a day, and it actually performs best in well-drained soil that is not overly rich. Too much fertility can lead to floppy growth and fewer flowers. Water needs are moderate. Once established, Bluebeard is fairly drought-tolerant, which makes it a wonderful low-maintenance flowering shrub for gardeners who do not want to fuss over watering schedules all summer long. One common mistake is planting Bluebeard in heavy clay soil without improving drainage first. Wet roots in winter are one of the fastest ways to lose this plant. Another mistake is over-pruning too early in spring. Caryopteris blooms on new wood, so you actually want to cut it back hard in early spring, not in fall, to encourage strong new growth that will carry the season's flowers. This is also a favorite of bees and butterflies, so if you enjoy watching pollinators move through your garden, Bluebeard gives you a front row seat. For beginners, this is a forgiving, low-fuss shrub, and it is a perfect example of choosing plants for what happens later in the year, not just what looks good in May. Shrub 8, Panicle Hydrangea. Most people choose plants for spring, but experienced gardeners think about what happens months later, and that brings us to Panicle Hydrangea at number 8. Unlike the classic mophead hydrangeas most people picture, Panicle hydrangeas produce cone-shaped flower clusters that start out white or pale green and slowly shift into shades of pink, rose, and even deep red as the season progresses. This natural color transition is part of what makes them such a valuable fall garden shrub. The same plant essentially changes its look as summer turns into autumn. Panicle hydrangeas bloom from mid to late summer and often hold their color well into fall, sometimes even drying attractively on the plant for winter interest. They tolerate more sun than other hydrangea types, often thriving in full sun to partial shade, and they are more forgiving of soil conditions. Watering is important during the first year or two while the roots establish, but once settled in, Panicle hydrangeas are considerably more drought-tolerant than their mophead cousins. Maintenance is straightforward. They bloom on new wood, so pruning in late winter or very early spring, before new growth starts, encourages strong stems and full blooms. A common mistake gardeners make is pruning at the wrong time, which can remove the very growth that would have produced this year's flowers. Another mistake is planting them somewhere too shady, which leads to fewer blooms and weaker stems that flop under the weight of the flower clusters. For beginners, Panicle hydrangeas are one of the most reliable flowering shrubs you can plant, and their gradual color shift makes them one of the best examples on this list of a plant that literally carries your garden from summer into fall. Shrub 7, Rose of Sharon. At number 7 is a shrub that brings a tropical, almost exotic feeling to a late summer garden, Rose of Sharon. The reason this shrub earns its place here is its incredible bloom window. While many shrubs finish flowering by midsummer, Rose of Sharon is just getting started, often blooming from midsummer all the way into early fall. The large, trumpet-shaped flowers come in shades of white, pink, lavender, and deep purple blue, often with a contrasting colored throat that adds visual depth. Rose of Sharon prefers full sun for the best flowering, though it tolerates a bit of afternoon shade in hotter climates. It adapts to a wide range of soil types, which makes it a genuinely beginner-friendly choice. Watering needs are moderate, with regular water helping during dry spells, especially for younger plants. One thing to know before planting is that Rose of Sharon can self-seed fairly aggressively in some regions, so choosing a sterile or low-seed variety can save you from unwanted seedlings scattered around your yard. This is a great example of why variety selection matters so much with flowering shrubs. A common mistake is under-pruning, which can lead to a leggy, top-heavy shrub. Light structural pruning in late winter helps keep the plant full and encourages more blooms rather than bare lower stems. For a fall garden, Rose of Sharon offers something few other shrubs can: large, dramatic flowers that keep going strong even as summer winds down. Shrub 6, Butterfly Bush. But this next shrub solves a problem many gardeners don't notice until summer starts fading: the sudden disappearance of pollinators from the yard. That is where butterfly bush comes in at number 6. Butterfly bush is exactly what it sounds like, a magnet for butterflies, along with bees and even hummingbirds. The reason pollinators love it so much comes down to the long, cone-shaped flower clusters packed with nectar-rich blooms in shades of purple, pink, white, and deep magenta. In a garden that is starting to lose its color, a butterfly bush in full bloom becomes a moving, living display of wildlife. This shrub blooms from summer through fall, often continuing until the first frost in many climates. It thrives in full sun and prefers well-drained soil, and it is genuinely drought-tolerant once established, making it a great low-maintenance flowering shrub for busy gardeners. Here is a design secret many people miss. Deadheading, which simply means removing spent flower clusters, encourages butterfly bush to produce even more blooms throughout the season. Skipping this step is one of the most common mistakes, since it causes the plant to put energy into seed production instead of new flowers. It is also worth mentioning that butterfly bush is considered invasive in some regions, so gardeners should choose native alternatives or sterile, non-invasive varieties, depending on their location. This is a perfect example of why success depends on climate and regional conditions, not just personal preference. Always check what performs responsibly in your specific area. For beginners who want to attract pollinators and enjoy a garden full of movement and life late into the season, butterfly bush is hard to beat, as long as the right variety is chosen for your region. Shrub 5, Abelia. At number 5 is a shrub that quietly does more work than almost anything else on this list. Abelia. Abelia produces small, trumpet-shaped flowers in soft white, pink, or blush tones, and it blooms for an unusually long stretch, often from early summer all the way into fall. The reason this shrub earns its place here is its sheer reliability. While many shrubs have a short, dramatic bloom window, Abelia just keeps going, quietly filling your garden with color and a light, sweet fragrance for months at a time. It prefers full sun to partial shade and adapts well to a range of soil types, as long as drainage is decent. Watering needs are moderate, and once established, many varieties handle short dry spells without much trouble. Maintenance is low. A light shaping prune in late winter or early spring is usually all it needs. A common mistake with Abelia is planting it somewhere too shaded, which reduces both flowering and the attractive bronze or variegated foliage that many varieties offer. Another mistake is over-pruning into a tight formal shape, which can remove flower buds and reduce the natural, graceful arching form that makes Abelia so appealing. For a fall garden, Abelia works almost like connective tissue, bridging the gap between the big dramatic bloomers and quieter background plants, giving your landscape continuous color without demanding much attention. Shrub 4, Spirea. Number 4 brings us to a shrub nearly every experienced gardener recommends for beginners, Spirea. Spirea is beloved because certain reblooming varieties will flower in late spring, take a short rest, and then produce a second flush of blooms in late summer into fall, if you deadhead them properly. That second bloom is exactly why this shrub earns a spot on this list. It gives you a plant that essentially performs twice in one growing season. Flower colors range from soft pink to deep rose, depending on variety, and the foliage on many types shifts to attractive orange, copper, or burgundy tones as fall approaches, adding a second layer of seasonal interest even after the flowers fade. Spirea prefers full sun for the best blooming and handles a wide range of soil types, making it one of the most forgiving flowering shrubs for beginner gardeners. Watering needs are moderate, and once established, Spirea tolerates short dry periods reasonably well. The most common mistake with Spirea is skipping deadheading after the first bloom cycle, which reduces the chances of that valuable second flush of flowers. A light trim after the initial blooms fade encourages fresh growth, and more flowers later in the season. Spirea is proof that sometimes the best fall garden ideas involve plants that already bloomed once and are simply given the chance to do it again. Shrub 3, Beautyberry. At number 3 is a shrub that flips the whole idea of a flowering shrub on its head, Beautyberry. While Beautyberry does produce small, delicate pink or lavender flowers in summer, its real fall garden magic happens afterward, when clusters of vivid purple, almost metallic-looking berries form along the stems. The reason this shrub earns its place here is that it extends garden interest even further into fall than most flowering shrubs, shifting from flowers to a truly striking berry display right when everything else is winding down. Beautyberry prefers partial shade to full sun, depending on your climate, and it tolerates a range of soil types as long as drainage is reasonable. Water needs are moderate, with consistent moisture helping produce the fullest berry clusters. Maintenance is fairly low, and many gardeners prune it back hard in late winter, since it blooms and fruits on new growth. A common mistake is expecting immediate berry production the first year. Beautyberry often needs a season or two to establish before it produces its full, show-stopping berry display. Another mistake is planting it in deep shade, which limits both flowering and berry formation. For a fall garden, Beautyberry offers something genuinely unique on this list: color that continues to build after the flowers themselves have finished, which is exactly the kind of extended seasonal interest that separates an average garden from a truly memorable one. Shrub 2, Dwarf Crape Myrtle. We are almost at the top of the list, and number 2 is a shrub that brings long-lasting, vibrant color to smaller garden spaces. Dwarf Crape Myrtle. Dwarf Crape Myrtle produces clusters of crepe paper, like flowers in shades of white, pink, red, or purple, and the reason it earns such a high spot on this list is its incredibly long bloom period, often running from midsummer well into fall in many climates. Few flowering shrubs stay in bloom for as many consecutive weeks as this one does. It requires full sun for the best flowering, at least 6 hours of direct light daily, and it prefers well-drained soil. Once established, dwarf crepe myrtle is quite drought-tolerant, which makes it a genuinely low-maintenance flowering shrub for warmer climates in particular. It is worth noting that hardiness varies significantly by region, so checking your specific USDA zone before planting is essential. Many varieties also offer attractive fall foliage color and interesting bark texture, adding value to the landscape even after the flowers are finished. A common mistake is severe, improper pruning, sometimes called topping, which can weaken the plant and reduce flowering rather than improve it. Light, selective pruning in late winter is a much better approach. Dwarf crepe myrtle is an excellent choice for gardeners who want dramatic, long-lasting color without needing a large amount of space, making it perfect for smaller yards, foundation plantings, or as a repeated element throughout a landscape design. Shrub 1, Hydrangea. And now we've reached the final shrub. One of the best examples of how a single plant can completely change the feeling of a garden. The classic hydrangea. Hydrangeas are loved for good reason. Their large, rounded flower clusters create an immediate sense of abundance and softness in the garden, and few other shrubs deliver that same lush, romantic look. But here is what many gardeners do not realize. Not all hydrangeas perform equally well later in the season. This is why variety selection matters so much. Reblooming varieties, which flower on both old and new wood, tend to perform far better into late summer and fall, compared to older varieties that bloom only once, earlier in the season. If you want a hydrangea that contributes to a true fall garden display, look specifically for reblooming types when you are shopping. Hydrangeas generally prefer partial shade, especially in hotter climates, though some varieties tolerate more sun with consistent moisture. Watering needs are higher than many other shrubs on this list. Hydrangeas want consistently moist, well-drained soil, and they will let you know quickly when they are thirsty, since their large leaves wilt noticeably in dry heat. Now let's talk about the single biggest mistake gardeners make with hydrangeas: pruning at the wrong time. Many hydrangeas set next year's flower buds in late summer or fall, on what is called old wood. If you prune these varieties in fall or early spring, you can accidentally cut off the very buds that were about to become this year's flowers. That is why so many gardeners end up with a hydrangea full of healthy green leaves and no blooms at all. Before pruning any hydrangea, it is worth taking a moment to identify whether your specific variety blooms on old wood, new wood, or both, since the correct pruning time depends entirely on that answer. Getting this one detail right solves one of the most common and frustrating hydrangea problems. For beginners, hydrangeas are absolutely worth the learning curve. Once you understand your variety, watering needs, and pruning timing, they become one of the most rewarding, most photographed flowering shrubs you can grow, and a reblooming variety in particular can genuinely help carry your garden's color from summer straight into fall. Garden design tips. Now that we've covered all 9 shrubs, I want to shift into something that separates a good garden from a truly professional-looking one, because simply planting beautiful shrubs randomly around your yard does not automatically create that polished, designer look. The first design secret is repetition. Professional landscape designers rarely use a single shrub just once. Instead, they repeat the same plant, or the same color, at intervals throughout a garden bed or across a yard. This creates a sense of rhythm and intentional design, rather than a scattered collection of unrelated plants. The second idea is combining shrubs with perennials. Shrubs give you structure and long-term presence, while perennials fill in around them with additional texture, height, and bloom timing. Layering these together creates a garden that feels full and dynamic rather than sparse. Color is the third piece of this puzzle. Rather than choosing shrubs purely based on individual beauty, think about how their bloom colors work together as the seasons shift. Cooler blues and purples, like those from Caryopteris, pair beautifully with the warmer pinks and reds of Spirea or Crape Myrtle, creating a palette that feels considered rather than random. Height is another layer worth planning intentionally. Taller shrubs like Panicle hydrangea or Rose of Sharon work well toward the back of a bed or as focal points, while lower-growing shrubs like Abelia or Spirea fill the middle ground, and perennials or ground covers finish the front edge. This layered approach mimics how plants naturally grow in the wild, which is part of why it feels so effortlessly beautiful. Shrubs can also serve as anchors in your landscape, meaning they mark key points in your yard, corners of a house, the edges of a patio, or entry points along a path. Anchoring these spots with substantial, reliable shrubs gives the entire landscape a sense of structure that ties everything else together. Finally, and this is the idea that ties this entire video together, plan your bloom timing across seasons, rather than focusing only on what looks good right now. A truly beautiful garden is not built around one single moment. It is built around a sequence, spring flowers fading into early summer blooms, which transition into the late summer and fall shrubs we covered today. When you plan for that sequence, your garden never has a moment where it looks empty or forgotten. Of course, success with any of these shrubs depends on real-world factors like your climate, your USDA hardiness zone, your soil conditions, and how much sunlight your specific space receives. What thrives in one garden may need a little more care in another, so always check what performs well in your particular region before making your final choices. Late summer does not have to be the moment your garden loses its spark. Before fall arrives, these 9 flowering shrubs give you a real, practical way to keep your landscape colorful, alive, and full of movement from butterflies and bees, all the way through the changing colors of autumn. Whether you are planning ahead for next year or looking for ways to fill gaps in your garden right now, the real secret is not planting more. It is planting with the seasons in mind, choosing flowering shrubs that keep performing long after the early summer rush has faded. A beautiful garden is not about having the most plants. It is about choosing plants that keep performing throughout the year. If this video helped you rethink your garden's fall potential, let me know which shrub you are most excited to try in the comments below. And consider subscribing for more gardening ideas, plant guides, and design tips to help your outdoor space look its best in every season.